I think that Donald Trump doesn't understand policy, and I think that he was saying whatever he thought would sort of get him through that meeting at the time. I have, like Brittany, I'm not at all surprised anymore when he lets us down and when he does the thing that is the most right-wing choice available to him at any given moment. I think we all should be hopeful when you look at what just happened in Florida, where they made a whole series of additional gun control laws. What they passed? And it's not like Florida is just any state on the map. It's a state where the NRA has dominated policymaking at a state level in a way that is truly extraordinary and was a petri dish for exporting horrible laws all across the country. And the other reason we should be hopeful is we just met with a bunch of high school and college students backstage. Where are you guys? Woo! We just met with some students backstage who are organizing the March for Our Lives here out of Texas. So we're hoping they would stand up.
But the question is, obviously, this was not everything that the Parkland students wanted. They wanted an assault weapons ban. An assault weapons ban is obviously broadly politically popular. But does anyone think that this law would have passed if only politicians had taken the lead on this and if these students hadn't done what they did?
I hear laughter in the
It's two things. One, it's continuing to organize at the state level because there are laws that can be, we don't have to wait for Congress. We can pass things at the state and local level, the municipal level, to make schools safer, communities safer. And then this is all about organizing towards the 2018 and 2020 elections because the reason that Congress, after things like Parkland, after Newtown, after gun violence happening in communities across this country, the reason they will not do something that is popular with huge bipartisan majorities is because they are more afraid of the people who oppose gun control laws than those who support them. And the only way to change that view is to campaign on this issue and win big at the ballot box. That is the only way to change the political dynamic in this country.
I want to continue to shout out these young people because they have to keep doing exactly what they are doing in building an intersectional movement. And that's critically important on this issue because it's easy to just say gun control, gun control, gun control, and not think critically about how certain measures will disproportionately affect certain communities. And so as an activist myself, I am in deep admiration of the group that just stood up because it is incredibly diverse. And besides the fact that as a former teacher myself, I am very clear that I would rather you spend the money you're going to spend on arming teachers on actually paying teachers what they're worth. Besides that important fact, there's research out there, very recent research, that talks about the adultification of black children. So young black girls are seen as less innocent as early as the age of 5, and black boys are seen as more adult and less innocent as early as the age of 10. We can't forget places like South Carolina, where we saw a student be slammed against the floor in her desk by a school police officer. We can't forget 6-year-olds being dragged across the floor in their elementary school. So I had to personally get a 7-year-old out of handcuffs inside of a school building. So when you think about it, what we can't actually do is set up a system, continue to set up a system where black and brown children are disproportionately punished by people who now have more power and have a firearm. Like, I do not want to open the newspaper one day and hear a teacher say, I feared for my life because Demetrius raised his hand. Like, we have enough research to know that this is a terrible, terrible idea.
It is a very good thing that these Parkland students have taken on this issue because it's raised awareness and made things like this law possible. But we still have these different kinds of gun violence in this country, and mass shootings have the broadest appeal, they create the broadest fear, they touch all communities, and so they make a bigger coalition, and that leads to things like raising the age limit on AR-15s, and assault weapons. That means banning things like bump stocks, but again, still the largest cause of gun deaths in the country are still suicides, and after that, it's still sort of the daily violence in communities across this country. And we still haven't built a very strong coalition about how to fight those kinds of violence specifically, and those kinds of shootings don't make the headlines in the exact same way. So my hope is not that we only focus on mass shootings because they're the only kind of killing that touches all classes and that elites care about and that wealthier white communities care about, because it can hit their families too, but that these Parkland kids become a way we get to the other kinds of violence too. Because I think too often, especially on suicide, it's like, well, yeah, this kind of prevention might only affect suicides. But that's a really big deal, because I think so often we think like, oh, access to guns isn't just because people will get guns and kill more people. Guns themselves, all these studies after studies show that fingers pull the trigger, but the trigger pulls the finger too. And just guns being places causes people to take their own lives and take other people's lives that they never would have. They wouldn't have gone to a knife. They wouldn't have gone to another form of violence. So I think that in the same way what Brittany's talking about is important, talking about the impact of things like guns in arming teachers, arming whatever school officers would do. It's the same way we need to talk about the other kinds of gun violence that don't get the attention and make sure it's a bigger gun violence conversation.
Yeah.
They are in this for the long haul. And so they are here to organize for the march on the 24th, but then they're also going to organize for May 5th when the NRA comes to Dallas for their national convention. And they said, we want to take the spotlight away from the NRA and we want to put it on the march and on the protesters. And then they said, the next focus we have is November, and we're going to register people to vote, and we're going to organize. Because I think every time a mass shooting happens, and especially after Parkland, one of the first questions is, how do we keep this in the headlines as long as possible? How do we get the media to pay attention? And the truth is, in today's media environment, the cameras are going to go away, and that's when the real difficult work of organizing begins. And it happens away from the television cameras, and it happens on the ground, and it happens in neighborhoods when you start registering people to vote, and you get people to sign up, and you look to that next election to actually make real change. And so that's what's really inspiring.
The really good news is, one fortunate thing, because we have a president who watches television constantly, protesters are great on television, and it works. Yeah. And it's meant that people are more effective than politicians in driving news cycles now. We've seen that over and over and over again. I think that's one. And two, one benefit of the obstinance of Republicans in Congress and Republicans across the country is, slowly but surely, they're not standing against 50-40 issues. They're now giving us 60-40 issues, 70-30 issues for us to campaign on. Even now, the issues we're talking about, these were less popular even 6 months ago. Yeah. And so their failure to kind of move with this issue has given us something that is really popular. And they're not moving because of their own internal politics, but the country has moved.
Well, and the problem used to be, yes, 80-90% of the country is for expanded background checks, majorities are for assault weapons bans, but those aren't the people that show up at the polls, and those aren't people that, they're not one-issue people. They don't vote on guns. And now we're seeing there's a new generation of young people who are saying, we're going to vote on this issue, and we're going to be loud and we're going to be noisy about it.
Yeah.